Hey everyone, welcome back to my basement workshop. It's been a little bit since I have done one of these, but I have a story that I want to tell you. So I heard the story today about a guy, we'll call him Joe, and I really hope that's not his actual name. I don't really know what his actual name is, but we'll call him Joe. Joe had an awesome life. He was married, he had adult children, just got an amazing promotion at work, and as a result was getting ready to move to an awesome new house in a great area, and just had all of these awesome things going for him. Over the weekend, Joe shot himself and took his own life. It's kind of dark, I know, and that's kind of heavy. I get that. But I think there's something very, very important that I want to talk about here. And I don't know why I'm holding a screwdriver. From the outside looking in, Joe seems to have an amazing life and lots of things going for him. You know, from the outside looking in, it's hard for us to understand or even look at that and go, why would he be in such a state where he was so depressed, anxious, whatever, where he took his own life? The truth be told is I don't know. I don't know what was going on with Joe behind the scenes. All I know is looking from the outside in, things looked pretty great for him. But this really, sadly, illustrates a point I've made so often in my career in ministry and elsewhere in life. But in ministry, when I was teaching youth, I was never worried about the youth that talked to me about their mental health issues, about their anxieties or fears or depression or even thoughts of suicide. I was never worried about them. Why? Because they were talking. They were talking to me. And I could check in on them and I could ask them questions, and if they were in a place where they needed to talk, I was there and I was available, and I was the one constantly making sure that they were good, that they were okay. But it was the ones who said nothing. They are the ones that truly concern me. I was always worried about them. They could be the ones that were straight A students, always came to church, and even had great families. But they were the ones I'd often worry about. They don't seem like the ones that would do anything like hurt themselves or take their own lives. But speaking from personal experience, they are the ones who can. Early in my ministry, I had a student who was a straight A student, who was at church every time the door was open, and had a great family take his own life. And it shocked everyone. It was like everyone had no clue that this young man was suffering. And it was at that point in my life where I made the decision that in both my ministry and just my relationships in general, when I asked people, how are you doing? I didn't want the standard reply to that greeting of, oh, I'm doing fine, how are you? I actually wanted to know how they are doing. I work to make my relationships at a point where when I ask someone, hey, how are you doing? They know what I mean. They know I'm not just looking for that kind of back and forth, that I genuinely care and want to know how someone is doing. But there is this mentality I come across a lot, far too often in my life, with people very close to me who know my struggles with mental health, that it's the sentiment of, how am I supposed to know if they don't tell me? I'm not going to ask them, but how am I supposed to know if they don't reach out to me and say, hey, I need help? And today I want to talk about three things branching off of that. One, why that is an incredibly lethal ideology to have. to why people who suffer with mental illness struggle so much to initiate those conversations and talk about it, why in most cases they won't. And lastly, I want to remove the fear from talking to someone who has mental illness. I want to remove that fear. But let's start with why having the mentality of I'm not going to ask someone how they're doing. If they're struggling, they have to come to me first. They have to initiate that conversation. I literally had someone tell me that very, very recently. Say, how are people supposed to know that I struggle if I don't reach out to them and say, hey, I'm struggling? I want to talk about that. First off, why is that incredibly dangerous ideology? And that one and two, my first 2 points kind of run together in this regards. Why do people struggle? Why is that such a dangerous mentality to have? There are metal shavings in my tea now. Anyway, wasting time. We'll get new tea. As someone who personally struggles with mental illness, I know how isolating it can be. I know personally the stigma behind having mental illness, especially as an adult, and even more so as an adult man. And don't get me wrong, people of all ages and all gender have stigma surrounding their mental illness. All I can speak to is the stigma surrounding my experience as an adult man. I don't want to downplay or trivialize anyone else. There's stigma around it for anyone, regardless of gender or age. But here's my story, here's my struggles as an adult man suffering with mental illness. I'm often looked down upon because of my struggles with mental illness. I'm often treated less than because of what I struggle with. I'm also treated as not a man because I struggle with chronic anxiety. It's hard for me to especially talk about my struggles with anxiety with other men because there's this stigma that mental health issues is a female thing, which just, there's so much wrong with that. So much incredibly wrong with that. So much so that I struggle in my relationships with other men to talk about my issues with mental health. It is a huge struggle because of that stigma, because of I am treated less than, because I'm not treated like an adult man. Often I am treated like a child when I talk about my struggles with mental health. I'm never treated in those situations as who and what I am. I'm always treated as something different. And it makes it so incredibly hard to talk about these things with anyone. Also, I know personally the struggle, the darkness that is mental health or mental illness. And I know when I was going through the worst of it, and when I do go through the worst times in my life, the struggle to talk, to communicate those is so hard because I feel so alone. I feel so isolated. I feel like if I talk about things, I'm going to be judged for having this, that this is a part of me that's gross and disgusting and no one's gonna want to handle it or deal with that people are gonna reject me because I have this gross and disgusting thing about me. I also have this kind of fear that if I talk about my demons, it's gonna cause other people to bear those demons as well and suffer as well. So me personally, it's been a struggle. It's been incredibly hard to open up to people about my mental illness. When I do, it's usually a sign that I greatly trust someone, and I have been burned so incredibly much by those people. There have been people from my previous church that I've talked to and been burned. And it makes it harder each and every time to trust someone new in talking about my mental health. And that is so much of what the issue behind why people who struggle with mental health will not, or struggle greatly, immensely, to initiate the conversation about their mental health with other people. And when people don't reach out and say, hey, how are you doing? And mean that as a genuine question, not a part of that ridiculous greeting, but a genuine question. Say, hey, how are you doing? How's your mental health? Even when they have no signs to say, hey, someone might be struggling. Most likely people struggling with mental health are not going to talk. I don't know if that's what happened with Joe, but I know it happens far too often. And when people feel alone and trapped in their anxiety or their depression, the desperation to break free from that becomes so powerful. The loneliness becomes so heavy, so dark, that you only see one way out. And that's to end it all. Know that someone who struggles with mental health, it is incredibly hard for them to talk. And refusing to ask them to initiate the conversation yourself condemns them to death. You can never assume by looking on the outside in that someone is okay. Can never assume. And you can never assume just because they've never talked to you about it that they don't suffer greatly. There's an importance in us in our culture to relearn how to interact with people who struggle with mental illness, not to ignore them or just sit around and hope that they talk to me, because it's not going to happen. And it's going to lead to people taking their own life because it's the only way they see out, because they're so incredibly alone and don't have any other options from what they can see. And yeah, sometimes even when they do talk, it's unavoidable. It happens. It's dark. It's sad. It's the reality of mental health, of mental illness. Lastly, I want to remove the fear around why people seem to struggle with initiating those conversations. And I think it comes from people are just like, I don't know how to handle someone or what to do with someone who struggles with mental health issues. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. True. You don't. You don't know how to handle that. You don't know how to help someone. So stay in your lane. Quite simply, stay in your lane. Unless you are someone who has the education, training, and licensing to actually help someone with mental health issues, stay in your lane. I know so often people, and I have many friends like this, who are just like, but I just want to fix things. You can't fix this. You are not a licensed therapist or a doctor. You cannot fix this. And that is fine. It is truly okay. I personally I just want someone to listen. I just want someone to hear me. I just want someone to make me feel like I'm not alone. That's all I need. I don't need here's how you fix yourself. I don't need suggestions on things I can do. I don't need that. I need someone to listen. I need someone who's willing to pray for me. I need someone who's just willing to be there. I want to talk to those real quick who suffer from mental illness. It's not fair to expect your friends and family who have no licensing or training or expertise in handling mental health issues, it's not fair to expect them to be able to fix your issues. The only person who can fix your mental health is you. And I know that's hard. Believe me, I'm preaching to the choir here. No, I've been there. I am there. You're the one who has to take responsibility for your own recovery. Whether that's going and getting therapy or taking advantage of the immense amount of resources there are for you, it is your responsibility. It is okay to ask those people to help you seek out those resources. It's okay to ask people to help you put in place and implement coping mechanisms, healthy coping mechanisms. It's okay. It is okay to ask them to do that help, but it is not okay to expect them to fix you, to have the solution. Because unless they're a licensed therapist or physician, someone who's trained and medically licensed to handle those mental health issues, they're not going to be able to. And it's not fair to them. So I encourage you to be your own advocate. Seek out the resources that are abundant to you. Ask those people to help you find them. That is a great thing for them to do. I don't know what was going on in Joe's life. It's truly sad. And it shouldn't take something like that for us to talk about and have these kind of conversations. Please recognize having the mentality of they're going to have to initiate the conversation is lethal. It is a lethal blight in our society. Know that people struggling with mental health, because of the massive stigmas surrounding mental health, they're not going to initiate the conversation. If they do, they've suffered a lot to get to that point. Speaking as someone who's been there. Don't take it for granted. Lastly, realize if you're not a medical professional or licensed or trained or educated to deal with these things, stay in your lane. Just be there. Just listen. Pray. Ask that person that you know who's struggling with mental health if you can check in on them, and then check in on them. Put it in your phone, mark it on your calendar. We need to change the way we think about people with mental health. Just because they look fine on the outside mean they're suffering. In all of our relationships, we need to approach them and build them up in such a way where we can have those conversations about mental health in a non-judgmental, hey, I care about you a lot sort of way. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. Just take saying, hey, how are you? And I mean, I really want to know, how are you?